Hi there, welcome to the first episode of the Rabid Dog's House. We will talk about some of our favorite and not so favorite things from the horror genre. Just some friendly discussions about what we love in terms of horror movies, books, shows, etc. This might be something from long ago or just now hitting theaters or Netflix, whatever. I am your host Justin Steele of Wicked Horror and 411 Pop Culture. At Wicked Horror, I do reviews, top 10 lists, and features. I am the author of a reoccurring feature called Back to the 80s, so in keeping with that feature and my love of 80s horror, I thought it would be fun for this first episode to feature and focus on the 1986 flick Critters. Released by New Line Cinema, also known as the house that Freddy Krueger built, Critters is a fun, sci-fi horror ride dealing with a group of escaped convicts in a galaxy far, far away known as the Krites. These creatures are a vicious breed that is a cross between porcupines and hedgehogs. Their pine needles are poisonous and cause the victim to pass out, and like a hedgehog, they have a tendency to roll when traveling, and personally, this is when I find them to be at their creepiest. After stealing a spaceship and heading to Earth, they are pursued by two bounty hunters. One is named Ugg and takes the form of rock star Johnny Steele, no relation to me, and the other is technically nameless as he or she, who knows, has trouble morphing into human form. Meanwhile on Earth, the Brown family, consisting of Mom Helen, Dad Jay, daughter April, and son Brad, are living out their run-of-the-mill lives. They are a small-town farm family where the most exciting thing going on is Dad's entry in the local bowling tournament. The parents clearly love each other, and the brother and sister have typical squabbles, but in general their life is fairly simple. The simple life will soon be turned into an out-of-this-world chaos as the bounty hunters and the Krites arrive on Earth. Critters is an 80s throwback to the sci-fi B-flicks of the 1950s and 60s. Alien invasions, typically infecting a small town. Critters takes this idea and realizes all the fun potential and utilizes the sillier aspects to make an enjoyable, mildly suspenseful, and engaging 80s feature. While the humor is completely intended, the film does not take itself too seriously. Still, for a movie that is intent on showing audiences a fun, popcorn-chugging good time, the special effects are actually really well done. Not even just for an 80s horror piece. I still only have my DVD copy, however, I can only imagine that the look of this film is even better on Blu-ray, and it was pretty fantastic on DVD. The outer space sequences are excellent, and the creature effects are detailed and more than effective. Critters was popular enough to spawn a 4-film franchise. When I was younger, I believe I watched the second feature the most, but now it is the original film that I am the most familiar with. I do not believe that I have watched the third or fourth film, and if any of you are out there are fans of it, let me know, and I think I might go ahead and buy the 4-disc Blu-ray. If you're not a fan, though, also let me know. And speaking of being a fan, I love all the performers in this film. It's no secret that Dee Wallace is one of my favorite actresses, and is just in general one of the all-time great heroines of horror. Cujo is my favorite film, and her portrayal of Donna Trenton is finally being more and more recognized as one of the truly underrated performances in cinema. Interestingly enough, she plays the mom role in 2 other 80s movies featuring alien creatures. Aliens in film typically fall into 2 categories. There are the good, altruistic aliens hoping to inspire humankind, and there's also the villainous aliens aiming to wipe out humankind. Dee has featured in movies with both kinds of these aliens. In 1982, she was Elliot's mom Mary in the beloved Steven Spielberg blockbuster E.T. E.T. is clearly in the category of aliens inspiring humans to do better. She is just as wonderful in Critters, in which the aliens want to cause nothing but harm and mayhem. A fun moment involves the bridging of Dee Wallace's involvement in both films when one of the Krites stumble upon an E.T. stuffed animal and promptly tear the head off of it. And it's a nice, fun, enjoyable moment, and she is just great in it. It's definitely not one of her stronger female roles. She does kind of play a more typical housewife, but she definitely rises to the occasion and steps up to the plate and does an excellent job. Terrence Mann portrays bounty hunter Ugg. Mann is a staple of Broadway theater, and his Broadway background is essential to conveying the Johnny Steele rock star persona. His song Power of the Night is repeated throughout the film, and it is all in its glory as an 80s big hair band hit, and it's played often to comic effect. Terrence is far and away one of my favorite of the Javers that have been in the many, many performances of Les Miserables. His rendition can be heard on the original Broadway cast recording, and he's definitely one of the smarmiest of all the Javert interpretations. The character of Ugg, incidentally, does appear in different forms throughout the Critters franchise. His counterpart in the film has difficulty morphing into human form, so he is played by different actors to hilarious effect. But Terrence Mann does a wonderful job. He also has that sort of smarmy quality, more of a silent role, but definitely is fantastic. Also starring in Critters is child actor Scott Grimes. One can catch his early work in such shows as Alyssa Milano's crush in Who's the Boss, all the way up until his teenage years as second string to Scott Wolf's Bailey in Party of Five. Audiences can now find him on Seth MacFarlane's new sci-fi series The Orville. His performance as Brad is endearing and likable. He lacks any phony quality and instead seems like a genuine adolescent when he is fighting back and forth with his sister, played by Nadine Velde. Their relationship seems pretty believable and is entertaining to watch. Oh, and April's boyfriend is played by, at the time, relatively young newcomer Billy Zane. Billy Zane is a staple of popular culture, featuring in many films such as Titanic, The Phantom, Dead Calm. And for you horror fans out there that haven't seen Dead Calm, I highly recommend watching this suspense piece. I think I might do a Back to the 80s article on this, but Nicole Kidman and Sam Neill are a couple on a boat just enjoying a nice little vacation. They come across another boat that is seemingly abandoned, but they find Billy Zane's character, and he is 100% cuckoo crazy. Neil ends up getting separated from Kidman, and she has to defend the boat and herself, and there's a lot of messed up situations in this film, but it's really enjoyable. Nicole Kidman is great, and Billy Zane is fantastic, as he always is. Another wink to horror fans in Critters is Lynn Shay as a police receptionist, Sally. Shay was the teacher in the original Nightmare series, and contemporary horror audiences will remember her now more prominently in the Insidious series. She also made a cameo appearance in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. But overall, Critters is the kind of film that defines the best of what the 80s had to offer, at least in terms of being an entry in 80s horror that deviates from the popular slasher craze of the time. But it's fun, has good jump scares. There's one effect that works particularly well where one of the Krites swallows a firecracker and ends up, instead of making him explode, it makes him implode, and it's the opposite of what's expected from this type of film. It's little things like that that makes Critters really stand out. At the time, Gremlins had been a huge hit, and there were claims that Critters was potentially a ripoff. Director Stephen Herek has pointed out, though, that the script had been completed a few years before Gremlins was even released. I personally don't think that Critters is a ripoff, per se. I think more, though, that because Gremlins was such a super big hit that it allowed for Critters to be made. I think they wanted, the studio anyway, not the filmmakers, were aiming to maybe ride the coattails of Gremlin's success, and so when they saw this script, they were like, oh, okay, now we'll take a chance on it. But I do think it was a very original idea. Overall, there are very basic resemblances, but nothing I would call plagiarism. Small creatures run amok, their backstory, intent, communication, as well as the overall story are more than just a little different. And speaking of the communication, the way the critters talk to each other is always hilarious. The audience is given subtitles for the translation, and it really does add to the sense of humor of the film. There are certainly plenty of 80s flicks where the humor is unintentional which can also be fun. But the laugh out loud moments in Critters are always intended. Of course, there is humor in contemporary horror and sci fi films, but to me personally, nothing quite matches the 80s way of doing things. In prepping for this episode, I showed this film to my friend Jackie. She loves the Orville, and so when Scott Grimes' name came up in the opening credits, she was clearly delighted, and I knew that she was going to enjoy this movie. However, she definitely got involved with some of the other characters, and it was fun for me to watch her leap back during a couple of jump scares. When one of the Krites bites at Billy Zane's hand, she definitely levitated back up off the seat, and it was great. However, she was pretty cynical about one of Dee Wallace's moments that broke my heart. Jackie has a low tolerance for people making mistakes when they're scared. Audiences, and Jackie, when people are scared, they sometimes do dumb things. Forgive them. So I think modern audiences can still find plenty to enjoy with the original Critters. I know the rest weren't as successful at the time, but there is certainly a cult following still today. The performances are pretty terrific and propel the film along easily. The gore level is not overt, but will still please those kinds of horror fans. There is a suspenseful atmosphere, but it's the kind of feeling that one gets from more of a roller coaster ride. There are ups and downs, but the short runtime will ensure that viewers get off the ride before Critters overstays its welcome. Sure, there is a suspension of disbelief needed for the science parts of the science fiction, but again, this film is not trying to be Alien or 2001: A Space Odyssey. While slashers are my favorite types of films from the field of horror, I definitely am up for some science fiction horror hybrids. And I do have a special affection for these sillier kinds of sci-fi picks. I grew up watching reruns of Lost in Space and Killer Clowns from Outer Space. It was an early horror movie that I remember watching and still love, and Critters fits alongside that type of movie. Incidentally, the Chiodo brothers who created Killer Clowns from Outer Space also worked on the effects in Critters, and I think the Sci-Fi Network is gearing up to do a sort of TV series about Critters that I think is going to be related to Killer Clowns. We here at Wicked Horror and in the Rabid Dog's House certainly recommend Critters. If you are looking for a lighter bit of horror with some bite, but also laughs and intended silliness, this is a good film for you. But please comment, let us know if you're a fan of Critters, which of the 4 films are your favorite. Like I said, the Sci-Fi Channel is going to be potentially doing a series. Are you for or against this idea? This is your host, Justin Steele. You can find me over at Wicked Horror or on YouTube at 411 Pop Culture. Thanks for watching the first episode of the Rabid Dog's House. Have a good one.